Charles's voice sliced through the kitchen clamor sharp as a cleaver. "Cynthia, bring me some tea now." I paused, my hands submerged in soapy water. "Wait, I'm doing the dishes." His tone was thick with disbelief and impatience. "Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders?" But I began, only to be interrupted again. "What a useless wife you are. Make me some sweet coffee, please." This new demand came from Kelly, my mother-in-law, who was lounging in the living room, indulging in a slice of cake she had snagged from the fridge. Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she spoke. I sighed, my gaze falling on the mountain of dirty dishes. "There are so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, useless wife." Charles's words echoed, each one a stinging lash. I am Cynthia, a 30-year-old working mother ensnared in a life that felt more like a dungeon than a sanctuary. I yearned for love and companionship, but instead, I found myself tethered to Charles and his imperious mother. Our 5-year-old son was the sole beacon of light in my otherwise dim existence. We resided in Charles's parental home, a setup I had reluctantly agreed to under the guise of caring for Kelly following my father-in-law's death. Initially, I sympathized with her, believing she was mourning. However, it didn't take long to see that I was merely a pawn in her twisted game of domestic dominance. No matter how diligently I cooked, cleaned, or worked, it was never enough. My efforts were consistently met with derision. My meals were either ignored or viciously critiqued. "This sautéed vegetables and shrimp is so half-hearted," Kelly would sneer. "Cook it properly from scratch." "I'm busy and can only make simple things," I'd respond, striving to maintain my composure. "That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law," she'd snap. "Cook from scratch. Why don't you cook?" Trapped in this relentless cycle of demands and disapproval, I longed for a change, yearning for a day when I could reclaim my life and find the peace that seemed so elusive. I hesitantly ventured a question one day, almost immediately regretting it. "Then you're a good cook, right?" Her reply was frosty and dismissive. "Why would I do housework when you're here?" Her words were like a slap, cold and calculated. Their cruelty deepened as time wore on. They stopped acknowledging my presence altogether, treating me as if I were a specter haunting my own home. Initially merely overlooked, I now felt utterly invisible. 6 years of living under this oppressive cloud passed respectively. Our son was growing up, but the oppressive atmosphere in the house remained unchanged. My mother-in-law, now 65, seemed to derive pleasure from my misery. One evening, as I trudged home from work, a heavy realization dawned on me. To them, my existence was meaningless. I felt like nothing more than a shadow, unnoticed and ignored, except by my son, whose recognition I cherished deeply. The thought of losing even that sliver of acknowledgement was unbearable. Upon arriving home, I began to cook immediately, trying to stave off the creeping sadness. I prepared Sichuan chili chicken, crispy fish fillets, and a beef and broccoli stir-fry, hoping to bring a semblance of normalcy to our dinner table. Suddenly, Charles broke his prolonged silence. "Bring me the mayo," he commanded abruptly. "Sure, here you are," I responded, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in a long while were not words of thanks or even simple conversation, but yet another order. It was the final straw for me. The evening deteriorated further when Kelly commanded, "Clean the toilet, right now." I was stunned. "Yes, right now," she insisted, her tone dripping with venom. Unable to contain my frustration any longer, I protested, "Don't say such things while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your heart." Her eyes narrowed and our argument escalated rapidly, with Charles jumping in, demanding that I apologize to his mother. But this time, I stood my ground. For the first time in years, I confronted them, and the conflict reached its peak, marking a turning point in my stifling existence. Faced with the relentless toxicity of my home life, I made a resolute decision to escape for both my son's future and my well-being. Retreating to my room with a newfound determination, I swiftly downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and presented them to Charles. His face registered shock, but within me surged only a steadfast resolve. "I'm filing these," I declared, meeting his stunned gaze with unwavering certainty. For the first time, I felt as if I had stepped decisively out of the shadows and was ready to reclaim my life. In the days that followed my announcement, the household was rife with harsh stares and cutting remarks. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I experienced an unusual sense of liberation. One evening, while serving dinner, Kelly scrutinized the food with disdain. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I swallowed my frustration, focusing instead on my son's beaming smile. "Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight," I encouraged him gently. Charles, never one to miss a chance for sarcasm, interjected, "Oh, now suddenly you're the perfect mother, huh? What a joke." Anger bubbled within me, but I maintained my composure. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son," I replied. Kelly scoffed. "Don't act like you're better than us. You're just a nuisance in this house." The tension at the dinner table was palpable as Charles's insults continued to fly. "So, Cynthia, have you ever thought about how you'll manage after the divorce? You can barely handle running a household, let alone your own life." I met his gaze squarely. "I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." His smirk wavered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Kelly quickly intervened. "Don't be ridiculous. You rely on us more than we rely on you." The conversation then turned to finances, a subject they usually avoided. "You know, without my paycheck, this household would struggle." My words were firm, reflecting my readiness to end my dependence on them and start anew. Speaking more to myself than to them, I voiced a harsh truth about their financial dependency. Kelly scoffed in response. "We'll manage. We don't need your charity." But Charles's silence was more telling than any words could be. He knew well that without my income, they would face significant difficulties. In the days that followed, the behavior of my in-laws grew increasingly erratic. Kelly oscillated between attempting to coax me into staying and hurling insults when I stood firm. Charles, on the other hand, seemed to retreat into himself, his usual confident air dissolving as he grappled with the reality of his financial dependence on me. One afternoon, I inadvertently overheard a conversation between them that sent chills through me. "Leaving her is not an option," Charles hissed under his breath, the tension in his voice. "We rely on her money." Kelly's reply was coldly strategic. "Don't fret. I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable that she won't even think about leaving." Realizing their true intentions was a stark shock. They cared nothing for me or our son, seeing us only as pawns in their game of control and financial manipulation. That night, as I lay in bed, a resolution began to take shape in my mind. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one, but it wouldn't be fought with words. I planned to strike at their pride and their finances, where it would hurt the most. The next morning, I initiated my plan by contacting a lawyer, a sharp and astute woman. "I want a divorce," I declared, "and I want to ensure they don't get more than they deserve." She nodded resolutely, understanding the stakes. "We'll make sure of that. You've been the main provider, right? We'll use that." With each passing day, my resolve only hardened. I began meticulously documenting everything, the insults, their financial scheming, and even the minor grievances. It was time to hold them accountable, to make them face the consequences of their actions. I was no longer just surviving. I was fighting back, determined to reclaim my life and secure a better future for my son. As I compiled evidence, a newfound strength surged within me. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of control over my life. The dark veil of disrespect was lifting, replaced by the promise of a fresh start. However, as the divorce proceedings commenced, the atmosphere at home became increasingly strained. Yet, with each passing day, my previous fears diminished, giving way to a solid sense of resolve. One evening, Kelly attempted a different tactic. "Cynthia, dear, why don't we forget all this unpleasantness? You know we're family," she suggested, her voice oozing insincerity. I met her gaze unflinchingly. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me," I replied. Charles, who had been quiet, scoffed dismissively. "Oh, now you're the victim. You're not as innocent as you pretend." Despite the rising anger within me, I remained composed. "I'm not pretending anything, Charles. I simply refuse to be your punching bag any longer." Inevitably, the conversation veered towards financial matters, as it often did. "You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him?" Charles challenged. I responded with calm confidence. "I've been supporting this family for years. I'll manage." Kelly's sneer was contemptuous. "You're nothing without us. You'll come begging to return." But their words no longer held sway over me. I understood my worth and grasped the truth about our situation. The following day, I met again with my lawyer, who laid out our strategy with precision. "We'll highlight their financial dependence on you. It'll be a key point in the custody battle and asset division." I nodded, feeling validated and supported by the law. The legal framework was on my side, and I was fully prepared to assert my rights. At home, tensions escalated to unprecedented levels. Kelly's attempts to belittle and intimidate me grew increasingly desperate. "You think you're clever," she hissed one evening, her tone venomous. Yet, standing in this turmoil, I was unshaken. I had seen their true colors, and I was ready to turn the page, armed with evidence, legal support, and a revitalized sense of self-worth. Facing Kelly's accusing glare, she uttered, "But you're just abandoning your family." I met her gaze directly, my resolve clear. "No, I'm finally standing up for myself," Charles chimed in, his voice seething with anger. "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." But his threats no longer held any power over me. I had moved beyond fear. As the court date loomed closer, I meticulously prepared for the legal battle ahead. I organized financial records, documented their spiteful comments, and compiled evidence of their neglect. One quiet afternoon, as I sorted through my papers, my son approached me, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I pulled him into a comforting embrace, my protectiveness for him surging. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new, happy life, just you and me." His arms tightened around me, and at that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. I was not just fighting for myself, but for my son's future. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, bringing with it a mix of dread and anticipation. I felt ready to face Charles and Kelly, to put an end to their control and abuse. I was determined to reclaim my life and secure the peace and happiness my son deserved. It was a day for justice, and I was committed to seeing it through. Sitting across from Charles and Kelly in the courtroom, a surreal mix of emotions washed over me. This was the moment of change. As the proceedings kicked off, Charles's lawyer portrayed him as a devoted husband and father, unfairly accused. Kelly cast herself as a grieving mother-in-law, mistreated by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. Yet, armed with my evidence and strengthened by my resolve, I was prepared to reveal the truth and start anew. Their performance was see-through, their falsehoods glaring. When it came to my turn to address the court, I spoke with clarity and composure. For years, I have been the sole breadwinner for this family, while my husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulative tactics have only added to our difficulties. Charles interrupted, feigning injury. "Cynthia, how can you say these things?" I faced him squarely, my look unwavering. "Support isn't just about words, Charles. It's measured by actions, and yours have been nothing but selfish and cruel." The judge listened intently as I laid out my case, presenting financial records, audio recordings of their verbal attacks, and testimonials from neighbors who had observed their conduct firsthand. The evidence accumulated, and with each piece, Charles's pretense fell apart and Kelly's composed facade cracked, revealing her true disposition. The courtroom hushed, the air thick with tension. Then my lawyer delivered the clinching evidence, a series of photographs and documents that not only confirmed Charles's infidelity, but also Kelly's secret affair with a neighbor, Jacob. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the images were displayed, exposing their duplicity for everyone to see. Charles's eyes widened in disbelief, while Kelly's face contorted with anger. "You violated our privacy!" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the murmurs. Calmly, I met her furious gaze. "No, I merely uncovered the truth, a truth both of you have tried too long to conceal." The judge had to call for order, but the damage to their standing was irreversible. Their credibility was shattered, their deceptions laid bare. As the hearing concluded, the judge's ruling was unequivocal. I was awarded full custody of our son, and the assets were divided equitably. Charles and Kelly were left with nothing but their sullied reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. The years of manipulation and mistreatment were finally behind me. I had stood up to them, and I had prevailed. This victory wasn't just for me, it was for my son's future, and for the new life that lay ahead of us, free from the shadows of deceit and control. The most triumphant moment, however, came just outside the courthouse. My son ran to me, his face lit up with relief. "We did it, Ma," he exclaimed joyfully. "Yes, we did," I replied, embracing him tightly. "We're free now. This is just the beginning for us." As we walked away together, I felt a profound sense of victory. This win wasn't just for me, it was for anyone who has ever felt diminished or powerless. It was a victory for truth and fairness, marking the start of a new chapter filled with hope and promises of a better future. The impact of the court's decision was immediate and tumultuous. News of Charles and Kelly's deceit spread rapidly, tarnishing their reputations within our tight-knit community. They could no longer maintain their facade of respectability. In the days following the verdict, I concentrated on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't help feeling gratified knowing that Charles and his mother were finally facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, an unexpected visitor appeared at my door. Hannah, Jacob's wife. Her eyes brimming with tears, she managed to say, "Cynthia, I've heard everything. I can't believe what Kelly did," her voice shaking with emotion. I invited her in and offered her a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she shared her heartache. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened and offered comfort, realizing the extensive damage Kelly's actions had caused beyond my troubles. The next day, I encountered Charles in town. He looked defeated, merely a shadow of his former self. His previous arrogance vanished. I stopped, facing him squarely. "What's left to say, Charles?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything," he murmured. These interactions underscored the profound changes that had taken place, not just in my life, but in the lives of those around us. The truth had liberated more than just my son and me. It had begun to mend the fabric of our community, torn by deceit and betrayal. Charles' late apology revealed his newfound recognition of just how much he had depended on my strength. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you," he admitted. This confession marked a significant power shift. He had lost everything: his pride, his home, his family, and it was only in this profound loss that he truly acknowledged his mistakes. However, it was Kelly who faced the most severe repercussions. Her affair with Jacob had not only destroyed her reputation, but also led to serious legal challenges. Hannah had filed for divorce and was suing her for alienation of affection, adding a legal stain to her scandal. The whispers and rumors that floated through our neighborhood painted a vivid picture of Kelly's downfall, portraying a woman toppled by her misdeeds. She had become an outcast, shunned by those she once considered friends. One afternoon, I encountered her at the grocery store. Her demeanor was subdued, a stark contrast to the commanding presence she once held. As she navigated the aisles quickly, trying to avoid attention, our paths crossed. Our eyes met briefly, and the resentment and defeat in her gaze were unmistakable. "You did this to me," she hissed as she moved past. Watching her retreat, I felt a complex mix of pity and vindication. "No, Kelly, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tables had indeed turned, and the consequences of their actions were now inescapable. Charles and Kelly were both reaping the outcomes of their years of deceit and manipulation. Seeing them struggle, I realized that the best form of revenge was simply living well, free from the toxicity that had once overshadowed my life. As I refocused on my son and our fresh start, I understood that this journey was not merely about revenge, but about freedom, breaking free from the cycles of abuse and control that had confined us. Looking forward, filled with a sense of hope and liberation, I knew that the best was yet to come. This new chapter wasn't just a turn of fate, it was a well-earned beginning, promising a future bright with possibility and devoid of the shadows that once loomed so large.